Start of the series we will be talking about the great success and interesting history of the Opel Olympia that was produced between 1935 and 1953. Before we start off, don't forget to like and subscribe for more and comment which model you want to see next. The Opel Olympia was the successor of the Opel 1.3 liter and was the first Opel to be produced in mass production. Marketing-wise, the Olympia began its life at the International Automobile Motorcycle Exhibition, or otherwise known as IAMA, in Berlin in February 1935, and was promised to cost around 2,500 German marks, or around 12,500 euros in 2023. After the IAMA, the real marketing for the vehicle began at the end of April 1935. Back then it was only possible to get the Olympia as a cabriolet sedan. It took up to November 1935 for the car to be able to be delivered as a two-door sedan. Eventually, in 1936, marketing for the car was used at its successful launch at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. This caused a lot of attention towards the car from German as well as foreigners. The car received its name for the 1936 Olympic Games that were covered in Berlin and was revolutionary for Opel because, as mentioned earlier, it wasn't only the first Opel to reach mass production, it was also the first Opel to have a self-carrying body and to work with crumple zones. Due to the Second World War, the Olympia received multiple different models. The first Olympia model, known as Type 13237, was produced between 1935 and 1938 and was the only model to have the 1.3 liter engine. The models after this all received a 1.5 liter engine. The second Olympia model, also known as the model OL38, was produced between 1938 and 1949. These first two models were both made and technically designed and produced before war. The OL38 model wasn't that different after the war, as it was before the war. The third Olympia model, also known as Type 1950, was produced between 1950 and 1953 and was the last Opel Olympia, with the other last Olympia being a more luxurious rebadged Cadet B. The second model was the longest running model and was the first model to adapt the 1.5 liter engine. The model's first introduction was in December 1937 and was officially presented at the Berlin Motor Show in February 1938. This model was bigger than the model before, had more power because of the bigger engine, and it was available in more body styles than before. Available models in 1937 were quite similar to each other, with the two-door saloon costing around 2,675 German marks or around 21,000 euros, the four-door saloon costing 2,950 German marks or around 23,500 euros, and the two-door cabriolet costing 2,750 German marks or around 21,500 euros. By the time the German government ordered Opel to stop the production of all civilian vehicles in October 1940, Opel had already produced 168,875 Olympias since 1935. 81,661 Olympias with the 1.3 liter engine and 87,214 Olympias with the 1.5 liter engine. These models were produced up to October 1940, were either powered by an improved 1.3 liter engine taken from the Opel 1.3 liter, used between 1935 and 1937, which makes 24 horsepower, 80 Nm and was fitted with a 3-speed manual transmission, and eventually the improved 1.3 liter used between 1936 and 1937 makes 29 horsepower, again 80 Nm, that was now fitted with a 4-speed manual transmission, and has a top speed of 95 km an hour. Or the cars were powered by a 1.5 liter engine, which was used for the second model that was delivered since 1938 and made over 30% more power in horsepower, as the car now made 37 horsepower and 88 Nm instead of 80 Nm and 24 or 29 horsepower. The Olympia now was also available to achieve a top speed above 100 km an hour, as it could now achieve a top speed of 112 km an hour. It wasn't fast, as the 0 to 100 km an hour time was 40 seconds. But it was a valuable car with good specifications for its price, as it has an average fuel consumption of 9.9 liters per 100 kilometers, which was a bit more than the 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers that the 1.3 liter had, but now it had a lot more power. It was more progressive than its competitors at its time. For example, the competition for Opel in 1937 had quite comparable or even worse specifications. The Volkswagen Beetle, for example, at the time had a 1-liter engine that produced 25 horsepower, and the top speed of this vehicle would not even hit 100 km an hour. The 1934 to 1937 BMW 315 Saloon that made 34 horsepower via a 1.5 liter 6-cylinder engine that had a top speed of 100 km an hour, and also another competitor was a Mercedes-Benz that had a 1931 Mercedes-Benz 130 that was powered by a 1.3 liter engine that made 26 horsepower and a top speed of 92 km an hour, or the 170H, also offered by Mercedes-Benz, which looked like the 130 but with a bigger engine, made between 1936 and 1939. Powered by a 1.7 liter that made 37 horsepower, just like the Olympia. This vehicle had 100 Nm and had a top speed of 110 km an hour. Even though the 130 and 170H looked quite similar to the Volkswagen Beetle, they were way more expensive, and also way more expensive than the Opel Olympia, costing up to 4,250 German marks, or more than 20,000 euro in today's money. Way more expensive than the Opel and really not that comparable at that point, only specification wise. The best competitor for the Opel Olympia could be related with the 1935 to 1940 Ford Eiffel that was powered with a 1.2 liter 4-cylinder that made 34 horsepower and 71 Nm via a 3-speed manual gearbox reaching a top speed of 100 km an hour. Just like the Opel Olympia, this model was also quite successful, with 62,495 units made between 1935 and 1940, making it more comparable with the Olympia than BMW or Mercedes-Benz. During the war, the Opel production plant in Rüsselsheim was severely damaged, being bombed by the Allies in 1944. Because of the bombing, Opel had to invest in reconstructing the production plant for the future production of vehicles. Later in 1950, this whole power plant was rebuilt. It was announced in November 1947 that production of the Olympia would be resumed. Eventually, it took Opel more than 7 years to resume the production of severe vehicles at the time, and as the Olympia's production was resumed in December 1947, 1 month after the first announcement was made. It was the first model which's production was resumed after the war. Opel wanted to resume the production of the Captain as well, because it already resumed the production of the Opel Blitz since July 1946. Capitan and the Blitz both used the same engines. But due to the regulations, Opel could not produce civilian vehicles with bigger engines than 1.5 liters. After the war, only the 2-door Olympia was produced, with the same engine and gearbox as before the war, but with a different, less fragile suspension. Also, the exterior of the car remained the same until the 3rd model. In 1948, the price of an Olympia was 6,785 German marks, or around 19,700 euros in 2023. The 2nd model, the OL38, remained in production up until December 1949, with 25,952 units being made up until that point. 20 in 1947, 5,762 in 1948, and 20,170 units in 1949. In 1950, the OL38 model was finally replaced with the Type 1950 model. It was also the last real model for the Opel Olympia. This model had a lot of differences from the last model, as the model grew in size. It gained 3 cm in length and 6 cm in width. This model was offered as a combi, panel van, a saloon, and a convertible. The gearbox was also updated, as the 4-speed manual gearbox was replaced by a 3-speed steering wheel operated gearbox. Between 1950 and 1951, 42,461 saloons were made, 3,140 convertibles and 5,890 panel vans. The prices of the last model of the Olympia varied from 6,400 German marks for the saloon, or 19,200 euros in 2023, to 6,600 German marks for the convertible, or 19,750 euros, and 7,350 German marks for the panel van, or 22,000 euros in 2023. In 1951, the engine of the Olympia received a small increase in power, as the engine now produced 39 instead of 37 horsepower, but still at 3,500 RPM. This led to a small difference, as the car's 0 to 100 time was now 39 seconds instead of 40 seconds. The panel van / combi variant did this in 52 seconds. The fuel consumption was now around 8.2 liters per 100 kilometers, and between 1951 and 1953, 81,283 saloons, 6,036 convertibles, and 22,390 panel van or combis were made. The rear of the car was also facelifted in 1951, as the rear window was now much bigger and the boot of the vehicle was more integrated into the body of the vehicle. Competition for the Opel Olympia OL38 and Type 1950, for example, were the Ford Taunus G73A that was produced between 1948 and 1952 and was powered by a 1.2 liter producing 34 horsepower and 70 Newton meters, which had a top speed of 105 km an hour and a 0 to 100 time of 55.7 seconds. Eventually, in 1953, the production of the Olympia was discontinued, and its successor was the Olympia Rekord. The Olympia name received a name revival in 1967 that was used up to 1970. It was a rebadged more luxurious Kadett B that had engines varying from 1.1 liter with 60 horsepower to a 1.9 liter with 102 horsepower. The Opel Olympia Rekord was the successor of the Opel Olympia, which was made before and after the war, and was revolutionary as it had a proper limousine body instead of the 1930s or 1940s body styles. The car was produced between March 1953 and July of 1957 and contained new styling elements from General Motors, the company that owned Opel at the time. It was either produced in Rüsselsheim in Germany or all the way overseas in Havana, Cuba. Now that Opel was owned by GM since 1929, the Opel Olympia Rekord had American inspirations, and that was noticeable. For example, the car was changed each year in its appearance, following the routine for the cars of the American market. The most noticeable exterior changes were for the grille. The strategy that was behind these actions were that the changes would lead to new publicity each year of the production of the vehicle. The car would become better every year, letting people think the latest is the greatest. With this American strategy, a decrease in the pricing of the Olympia was also included. Its pricing strategy was to lower the price each year of the production. The car cost 6,410 German marks in 1953 and 1954, or around 18,700 euros in 2023. In 1955, the price was already decreased to 5,850 German marks, or around 70,300 euros in 2023. And in 1956, this price was dropped further down to 5,410 German marks, or around 15,700 euros in 2023. And in the last year of its availability, in 1957, the price of the Olympia Rekord was 5,510 German marks, or around 15,600 euros in 2023. Which could not be compared to a modern day Opel because its model Corsa already starts at 20,000 euros in Germany. As mentioned earlier, the car was a successor of the Opel Olympia and was the predecessor of the Opel Rekord, as its name is the combination Olympia Rekord. During the production, the car received multiple body styles and facelifts, such as a 4-door limousine or a caravan, better known as a station wagon. However, it did not receive a wide amount of engine options, as the only engine that was available was the same 1.5 liter inline-4, which was updated since the Opel Olympia. The engine of the Opel Olympia Rekord was also used in the 1937 Olympia, and was changed very little since then. The only difference was a small increase in power, as it produced 37 horsepower in the 1937 Opel Olympia and now produced 40 horsepower, 94 Nm and a top speed of 120 km an hour, 0 to 100 time of 31.7 seconds for the sedan and 37.5 seconds for the Caravan. This engine was fitted in all Olympia record up to 1956, when the engine was finally improved due to an increase from 6.3 to 1 in 1963 or 1964 to 6.5 to 1 in 1965 to 6.9 to 1 in 1956 and 1957. This led to an increase in power from 40 to 45 horsepower and 94 to 107 Nm. This also meant that the top speed and the acceleration was improved. The new 0 to 100 time of the limousine was improved from 31.7 seconds to 25.9 seconds, and from the Caravan from 37.5 seconds to 28.9 seconds. Quite an improvement. The power of the engine was transmitted through a 3-speed, almost fully synchronized manual transmission, which was the only option to choose from during the production period of the Olympia Rekord. In its last year, in 1957, the Olympia Rekord received a fully synchronized transmission. The Olympia Rekord became a people's car, just like the Volkswagen Beetle was for Volkswagen. Its increase in quality and decrease in price throughout the years led to a successful selling point for Opel, with 129,000 units sold in 1954, 125,000 units sold in 1955, 139,000 units sold in 1956, and even 162,000 units being sold in 1957. The Olympia Rekord was produced up until halfway 1957. At that time, around 580,000 Olympia Rekords were produced, making it the most successful Opel to be produced at the time. It succeeded the success of its predecessor, the Olympia, and turned Opel's reputation around after some negative reputation points Opel had because of the Second World War activities. Eventually, the Rekord Olympia name was used for another 2 years up to 1959, because of Opel Olympia Rekord P, using the Opel Olympia Rekord name for its first 2 years of production. Later in 1959 and up, this was removed, as the name now was only Rekord. Competition for the Opel Olympia were the Ford Taunus 12M that was produced between 1952 and 1959, that was powered by a 1.2 liter engine that produced 38 horsepower, a top speed of 105 to 112 km an hour. This model was produced 247,174 times and was also quite successful, just like the Olympia Rekord. Another example is the DKW F91 that was made between 1953 and 1957, just like the Opel Olympia Rekord. This vehicle was powered by a 0.9 liter engine that produced 34 horsepower and a top 115 km an hour. This vehicle was also produced a lot, as 74,000 units were made, making it successful, but not even as close as the success of the Ford Taunus and not even near the success of the Opel Olympia Rekord. The Opel Rekord P2, also known as the Opel Rekord P, was produced between 1960 and 1963. Brought to the market in August 1960, the Rekord had more available models than ever, such as the 2-door limousine, 4-door limousine, 3-door caravan, a 3-door delivery van, and a cabriolet that was first made externally but was later made internally by Opel. Even though it had the same wheelbase as the Rekord P1, it was larger, as it had grown to 4.51 meters in length and 1.63 meters in width. The new Rekord received an all-new body which replaced the American styling impacts that the Rekord P1 had, such as the windows, to which the name indicated panoramic. Also, the front seating positions were redesigned. From now on, the couch of the Opel Rekord P1 had been replaced by the 2 front seats. This generation Rekord also featured new color schemes and had an optional 2-tone paint on the vehicles. Technically, the car was based on its predecessor but was modernized to apply to the current standards.
Even though the name Olympia wasn't used for this generation, Opel had used the name on the glove compartment lid to somehow indicate to its predecessor. As mentioned earlier, the cabriolet version of the Opel Rekord P2 was made internally and externally. This was because of the coach builder that converted two-door limousines into coupés and cabriolets. A total of around 20 cabriolets were made by these body shops. In 1961, Opel succeeded these activities by internally producing the cabrio and coupé versions themselves. These models were launched at the IAA in Frankfurt in 1961. Engine-wise, the car followed up the predecessor, but sometimes increased the power of the engines. The Rekord P2 had the 1.5-liter engine, the engine it all started with, and the Opel Olympia, and the 1.7-liter engine also used in the Olympia Rekord P1, which was added for the previous generation, just like the 1.2-liter engine. A new engine whatsoever was the 1700S engine, with the letter S indicated the super fuel it used, instead of the normal fuel. This led to a higher amount of power from the engine. The 1.2-liter engine that was used for the base model Rekord P1 up until 1962 for the Opel 1200 wasn't used in the Rekord P2 series, as it was parallelly used in the base model Rekord P1, the Opel 1200. An important option for the Rekord P2 was the availability of a 4-speed manual gearbox, which hadn't been in option since the Opel Olympia. This gearbox led to a lower fuel consumption and a better 0 to 100 time. As said earlier, most of the engines were improved compared with the same engines fitted in the vehicles of the previous generation. For example, the 1.5-liter engine gained 5 horsepower and 8 Nm from 45 to 50 horsepower and 98 to 106 Nm. This engine brought the car to 124 up until 28 km an hour and did this in 22.7 to 25.1 seconds for the 3-speed manual and 21.5 to 23.8 for the 4-speed manual. The average fuel consumption of this engine was 10.9 liters to 11.5 liters for the 3-speed manual and 9.3 liters to 9.9 liters for the 4-speed manual. Besides the 1.7-liter engine that was used in the Opel Rekord P1, there was also a new 1.7-liter engine that used super fuel. This engine was placed in all L models or luxury models. This engine had more power than the other 1.7-liter engine, as it has 60 horsepower and 125 Nm, and pushed the record up to 135 km an hour for the cabrio and 140 km an hour for the coupe. It accelerated the cars from 0 to 100 in 20.6 seconds to 18.3 seconds for the 3-speed manual and 18.7 to 16.8 seconds for the 4-speed manual. The average fuel consumption was between 11.6 to 11.3 liters per 100 kilometers for the 3-speed manual and 10.2 to 9.9 liters per 100 kilometers for the 4-speed manual. This engine had a compression ratio of 8 to 1 instead of the 7.25 to 1 for the other 1.7-liter engine. By the end of the production in February 1963, a total of 556,691 examples had rolled off the assembly line. The following month, in March of 1963, the successor, Opel Rekord A, came onto the market.
The Opel Rekord A was the first record to start with the alphabetic name and was the first record to truly show its power by introducing its first 6-cylinder engine. The Rekord A appeared in March 1963 and was a robust response to the success of the Ford Taunus 17M. The design of the new Rekord sedan didn't come from Germany, but from General Motors Technical Center in Michigan, and was inspired by the successful Chevrolet 2. It was styled to look slimmer and sportier than its predecessor, but underneath its clean design, the Rekord A remained faithful to the trusted technical layout of previous models, from which the 1488cc and 1680cc 4-cylinder overhead valve engines were taken, but now with more power and more options to remain relevant. Not only option and specification wise the Rekord A was up to date, but also styling wise, as the car was available in more body styles than ever, including a 2-door sedan, a 4-door sedan, a 2-door coupe, a 3-door station wagon, also known as the Caravan, a 2-door commercial van, and a convertible made by Carl Deutsch, which expanded its appeal to different market segments while only being 1 centimeter longer and 4.52 meters and weighing a bit more than its predecessor. The coupe in particular was noted for its elegant lines and was marketed as more premium, offering within the Rekord range. The base models came equipped with the same 1.5 liter inline-4 engine, first used all the way back in 1937 in the Olympia, but with improved specifications. With its now 55 horsepower, it was producing modest power suitable for everyday driving, as it had a top speed of 134 km an hour and reached 100 km an hour in 20.1 seconds up until 23 seconds, depending on the 3 or 4 speed manual gearbox. For those seeking more performance, Opel offered a bigger 1.7 liter engine, which provided a bit more power, rated at 60 horsepower, while still remaining quite fuel efficient at 9.1 to 9.3 liters per 100 kilometers. Both of these engines were paired with a 3-speed manual gearbox as standard, with an optional 4-speed manual as well. However, for those who wanted even more power, Opel improved its 1700S engine, which also was an option for the Rekord P2, but now producing 7 horsepower more, rated at 67 horsepower, giving the car a good top speed of 142 km an hour and a 0 to 100 km an hour time of only 16.4 seconds. And this engine was always paired with the 4-speed manual gearbox. This was, as said earlier, the first Opel Rekord to have an inline-6. And for those who wanted even more power, Opel introduced the most powerful 2.6 liter inline-6 engine, also called the L6, taken from Opel's top-of-the-line Admiral and Captain models, going all the way back to the Opel Super 6. This engine was very big and was reserved for the top-of-the-line models and offered a significant performance boost, as this engine had 101 horsepower and an astonishing top speed of 165 km an hour and a 0 to 100 time of only 12.2 seconds, making it a really well-spec'd vehicle for its time and class. This engine choice made the Rekord A an appealing option for those who wanted a bit more dynamic driving experience. Just like the 1700S, this engine also was always paired with a 4-speed manual gearbox and had an average fuel consumption a bit higher than the other engines, rated at 10.7 liters per 100 kilometers. The interior of the Rekord A was spacious and comfortable, reflecting Opel's focus on creating a car that was not only practical, but also enjoyable to drive for short and long drives. The dashboard featured a clean and simple design with easy to read gauges and controls. The safety features were modest by today's standards, but included seat belts for the first time and a padded dashboard, making the car safer during a collision. It was a very big success, and in August of 1965, after a total production of 1,154,632 units and 29,443 vans, it was replaced by the Opel Rekord B, which from the outside was surprisingly similar, but which under the bonnet or hood would introduce a new generation of 4-cylinder engines that would power Rekords all the way up until 1986, when Opel produced its last Rekord. In this video we're going to be talking about possibly the rarest Opel Rekord ever made from the factory. We are going to be talking about the Opel Rekord B. The Opel Rekord B has to be one of the most interesting models of the Opel Rekord ever made, originally never even being planned to go into production. This record has to be one of the shortest model years ever, as this Opel Rekord B only has been made between August of 1965 and July of 1966. A total of 11 months, not even a year. Mostly because it was only a slight facelift of the Rekord A, and therefore was succeeded by the Opel Rekord B in 1966 already. The Rekord B was a modernized version of its predecessor, the Rekord A. The body of the Rekord A had been modernized at the front and rear, as it for example currently had rectangular headlights. It also was available as a 2-door sedan, a 4-door sedan, a coupe or coupe, and a 3-door caravan. Opel had originally intended to launch the new generation of 4-cylinder engines in an all-new model, which eventually became the Rekord C. But as the scheduled 1965 launch date approached, it became clear that other key elements of the design would not be ready yet. With the marketing department and dealers geared up for a new model, the decision was taken to prevent the new engines in an updated, merely transition body. The resulting Rekord B bore the then highly unusual rectangular headlights and certain brightwork themes of the 1966 Opel Rekord C, so basically this car should have never been made, as it was produced just to fill a gap of 11 months between the Rekord A and C. Of the Rekord B, some things remained the same as in the Rekord A, as the car yet again was available as a 2- and 4-door limousine, a 3-door caravan, a van, a coupe and a cabriolet, also built by Carl Deutz again, just like with the Rekord A. Other things that remained the same were, for example, the engine layout, such as the 1.5 liter, the 1.7S and the 2.6 liter, all the Rekord A already had. The only engine that was really dropped was the 1.7N with normal gasoline or petrol. However, there also were improvements, such as the improvements of the 1.5 liter, which was increased to 67 horsepower, and also the 1700S gained another 8 horsepower, to 75 horsepower. But this time the Rekord also had a 1.9 liter engine available, also known as the Rekord 1900S, with 90 horsepower, giving the car a whopping top speed of 160 km an hour, and let the car reach 100 km an hour in only 12.5 to 13.5 seconds. Another new option was the 2-speed automatic gearbox, which eventually became available. It was a new luxury feature the Rekord gained. The top of the line engine remained to be the 2.6 liter, which was a modernized version of the 2.6 liter taken out of the Opel Super 6, still also being available in the top of the line Opel Kappa 2.6 liter as well. And with this generation being, the Rekord gained a new internal competitor with the 1.9S, which also had similar top speed and specifications. The interior design and even the color and trim options were largely carried over from the Rekord A, with many other aspects of the Rekord A the Rekord B was based on. The new somewhat modernized Rekord A model, or also known as the Rekord B by now, was produced between late summer 1965 and midsummer 1966, replaced on the Opel production line during the annual vacation shutdown of the Rekord C, which began to roll off it by August up until July of 1966, with only a bit less than 300,000 units made. 296,622 Rekord Bs were produced in just 11 months, still making it a very popular car, but production-wise it was a lot less than the normal Rekord A would have been. It was the base for the next generation Rekord, the Rekord C, which it originally had to be in the first place. It was somewhat a car that was never intended to be produced, and therefore is a very rare car, with an interesting story. The Opel Rekord C was a mid-sized family car produced by the German manufacturer Opel between 1966 and 1972 as the third model in the Rekord series. It succeeded the Opel Rekord B and introduced a series of modernizations for the time. The Rekord C was notable for its stylish, streamlined bodywork, earning its nickname Coke Bottle, due to its curvaceous, sculpted side profile and front profile, inspired by the American automobile design trends of the 1960s. It became one of Opel's best-selling models with around 1.3 million units sold, making it a prominent car on European roads during its production years. The Rekord C came in various body styles, including a 4-door sedan, coupe, a 3-door and a 5-door station wagon, a van, also called the Combi, and a cabriolet, made by Carl Deutz yet again, just like the Rekord B and A. The Rekord C adopted a sleek, streamlined look with its curved lines and a low profile. Its design reflected the influence of American cars of the time, especially the Chevrolet Chevelle. It had a wide front grille and round headlights, with a sloping rear end and relatively minimalist styling. The car's interior was straightforward and functional, emphasizing comfort and practicality for everyday use. Inside, the Rekord C offered a spacious cabin with a variety of trim options. It featured improved seats and visibility, providing a more comfortable ride than its predecessors. Safety features included front disc brakes, available on certain models, and seat belts in later versions, which were becoming standard for the era. The Opel Rekord C offered a range of engines to meet diverse market needs. These included petrol engines spanning from economical to higher performance options. The smallest engine was the 1.5-liter inline-4 petrol. This inline-4 engine produced between 58 and 60 horsepower, offering basic performance and fuel economy for entry-level models. It had a top speed of around 135 km an hour, a 0 to 100 time of 26.5 seconds, and have an average fuel consumption of 10.5 liters of normal petrol per 100 kilometers. The 1.5 was followed up by the 1.7-liter petrol, yet again being an inline-4, and was available in multiple versions, including a 60 horsepower N for the normal petrol and 75 horsepower for the S for the super petrol variant. The 1.7-liter engine was a more popular choice, balancing performance with efficiency. For even bigger engines, you had the 1.9-liter inline-4 petrol, and this was a more powerful option, with 90 horsepower in its base S form and 106 horsepower in the higher output Sprint variant. It catered to drivers seeking a bit more speed and power. The 90 horsepower had a top speed of 160 km an hour and a 0 to 100 time of only 16 seconds. This was a rather interesting and unique engine, but you also had a shortly delivered 2.2-liter inline-6 petrol. This 6-cylinder engine was rare in the Rekord C lineup, as it was available only for the 1966 to 1968 model years, but it was a bigger, more efficient brother of the 1900H or the Sprint, which was rated at 105 horsepower and somewhat was similar specification-wise, just being more fuel efficient, rated at 11 liters per 100 kilometers on normal petrol. This engine basically was positioned near the 1900H, with the 1900S being a lot slower and less fuel efficient. Each engine came with either a 3-speed manual in the beginning or a 4-speed manual for the later options, and was also available with a 2-speed automatic transmission, and later even a 3-speed automatic transmission depending on the market and customer preferences. A notable special edition of the Rekord C was the Rekord Sprint. This model featured a sportier design and was equipped with a high output 1.9-liter H engine, which was also called the Sprint. It also included interior updates and upgrades, and exterior-wise it was also upgraded styling-wise, such as a rally inspired stripe, sportier seats and a unique steering wheel. This edition was aimed at young sporty drivers who wanted a balance between practicality and performance. Another special version, which basically wasn't a version but a whole another model of the Opel Rekord C, was the Opel Commodore A, which was essentially a Opel Rekord C, but equipped with a larger 6-cylinder engines. It also featured additional comfort options and a higher level of interior finish, making it more upscale and luxurious compared to the standard Rekord C models. The 2.5-liter inline-6 also was available for the Commodore A, as it wasn't available for the Rekord C, but it was available in the Rekord A and B, for example. The Opel Rekord C was produced in various Opel factories across Europe, and its 1.3 million units made it one of the most successful Opel models of all time. This model's popularity stemmed from its wide range of body styles and engine options, making it accessible and appealing to a broad audience. The car was especially popular in Germany, but was also sold widely across Europe and other international markets. The Rekord C competed in the European mid-size market, primarily against other popular models from major car manufacturers. Key competitors included the Ford Taunus, which was produced in Germany. The Taunus was a direct competitor, offering similar engine sizes and body styles. You also had the Volkswagen 1600, and although this model was smaller, the 1600 was a popular family car choice at the time. You also had French competition, as the Peugeot 404 was a competitor, which was known for its durability. The Peugeot 404 was also a contender in the mid-size segment, particularly strong in French-speaking markets. Another German competitor was the BMW 1500 to 2000 series. Although being a bit more premium, BMW's 1500 to 2000 series appealed to a similar market with its sporty and refined features. And you also had an Italian competitor with the Fiat 125. Fiat's entry in this market, the Fiat 125 or 125, was popular across Europe and offered a range of engine choices also similar to the Rekord C. The Opel Rekord C succeeded the Opel Rekord B, a model that had only a short production run of a year or 11 months even, but laid the groundwork for the updated C model. The Rekord B was seen as a transitional model, introducing technical updates that the Rekord C would refine and improve upon. The successor to the Rekord C was the Opel Rekord D, which was launched in 1972 and was way more square. The Rekord D continued to build on the success of the Rekord C, which was more modern styling and improved its technology. It retained the spacious practical design and was available in similar body styles. The Rekord D continued Opel's strong presence in the mid-size family car market. The Rekord D has to be the first most boxy car Opel ever produced, and I believe this car also set the boxy standards for many cars that were introduced after its introduction in the 70s and 80s. It was also the first car to focus more on economy rather than power. The Rekord D's design was quite modern for its time, showcasing a more angular squared-off look than its predecessor. The car featured a long hood and relatively short rear deck, giving it a stylish, balanced appearance. Customers could choose from a range of body types, including a 4-door sedan, 2-door sedan, 3-door station wagon, also known as the caravan, a van, and a 2-door coupe. The interior was designed with simplicity and comfort in mind, featuring durable materials, a straightforward dashboard layout, and relatively spacious seating for both front and rear passengers. A total of 5 people could fit in this car. Opel placed a significant emphasis on passenger comfort and build quality as well, helping to make the Rekord D an appealing option for families, as well as business owners, for example, with the vans. The Rekord D came with a range of engines, including gasoline or petrol engines and, this time, first of all being, diesel options as well, each providing different levels of power to suit various driving needs. These engines were either paired with a 4-speed manual or with an optional 3-speed automatic gearbox. The smallest engine changed since the Opel Olympia Rekord, as it now was the 1.7 liter inline-4 called the 1700N. This base engine was introduced in 1972 and at that time produced 65 horsepower and was mostly aimed to provide basic performance for city driving and short commutes. It wasn't that powerful, but being the least powerful engine, it still had the top speed of 143 km an hour, a 0 to 100 time of 20 seconds. And that was actually quite okay. It wasn't fuel efficient by today's standards, as the average fuel consumption was 9.8 liter per 100 kilometers, but it was quite okay for the time being in 1970s. Later this engine was decreased to 60 horsepower and a top speed of 140 and a 0 to 100 time of 21.5 seconds, mostly because of fuel efficiency as well as durability. Besides the 1.7N or 1700N, you also had the 1700S, and this engine had 82 horsepower, being much more powerful than the 1.7N, and also the top speed was higher. At this time it was rated at 155 km an hour, but the 0 to 100 time was the one that improved a lot, now at 16.5 seconds rather than 20 seconds. This engine eventually got discontinued before 1977, as this engine was discontinued in around 1974. A year after 1974, in 1975, the 1.9N or 1900N was introduced, and this engine had 75 horsepower and was more based on economy rather than performance. That's also the reason why the 1700S, which wasn't that based on economy and more on performance, was actually discontinued because of the changing market demands. Besides the 1900N, you also had the 1900S, and this engine actually was before 1975, and it in the earlier stages had 95 horsepower. And this engine offered a bit more power and was a popular choice for those seeking a better mix of performance and somewhat economy. And besides the 1900S, you also had the 1900SH, which was basically like a more sportier car, just like the Rekord C was with the 1900SH, as this engine had 19 horsepower and had a top speed of 160 km an hour and a 0 to 100 time of 14 seconds. Although this engine was actually less powerful than the normal 1900S, because that had 95 horsepower instead of the 90 horsepower the 1900SH had. And this engine was more focused on performance and less on economy, and therefore, to compensate for the loss of the performance of the 1900S, Opel now increased the cylinder bores further and introduced in 1975 a 1979cc version of the engine for their Rekord 2000S. It had a maximum output of 100 horsepower claimed for what was the fastest Rekord from this generation. Neither its power nor its performance matched the 1900H version of the old 106 horsepower Opel Rekord C, which presumably reflected changed priorities in the marketplace following the fuel shortages and price shocks of the mid-1970s. Therefore, a later introduced 2-liter S or 2000S was introduced in 1975, and this produced 100 horsepower. The 2-liter engine catered to drivers looking for a bit more speed, especially on the highways, as it had a top speed of 170 km an hour, a 0 to 100 time of 13 seconds, and was the fastest engine in this generation. It was somewhat fuel efficient, as the average fuel consumption was around 9.6 liters per 100 kilometers, which is not that bad, and in my opinion it is actually quite interesting to see that the 1700N had an average fuel consumption of 9.8 liters when this was 9.6. Besides the petrol engines, the Rekord D finally for the first time had diesel engines available, being available in two different sizes. The smallest size was a 2-liter inline-4 diesel, also called the 2000D, and this engine was primarily made for Italy, mostly for taxis and such. It produced 54 horsepower, had a top speed of 130 km an hour, a 0 to 100 time of 23.7 seconds, and had a good fuel efficiency of around 7.6 liters per 100 kilometers. These engines weren't made for performance, but were made for reliability and fuel efficiency as well. You also had the 2.1 liter inline-4 diesel called 2100D, and this was the normal diesel made for markets that weren't struggling with taxes for diesel engines, and this model and engine produced 60 horsepower. This diesel engine was well suited for fuel-efficient driving and appealed to long-distance commuters and budget-conscious drivers. This was the most primarily used diesel engine and was a bit bigger than the 2-liter diesel because of the decrease in size for the 2-liter diesel being the taxes, and it was actually based on this 2.1-liter diesel. This engine was a bit more powerful than the 2-liter diesel and had a top speed of 135 km an hour, a 0 to 100 time of 23.4 seconds, and had an average fuel consumption a bit higher, rated at 7.8 liters per 100 kilometers. The Rekord D provided a smooth and balanced ride, benefiting from Opel's focus on suspension tuning. While not a high-performance car, it handled well and was comfortable on both city streets and highways. The Rekord's D rear-wheel drive layout gave it reliable traction and helped it feel well planted on the road. Opel occasionally released special versions of the Rekord D with enhanced trims and features, for example the Rekord Berlina. This upscale variant included premium upholstery a wood-trimmed dashboard, and additional soundproofing. It was aimed at customers seeking a more luxurious option. Besides the more luxurious option, you also had a more exciting option, in my opinion, as this was the Sprint edition. The Sprint model was a sporty version featuring bolder colors, sportier wheels, and often was paired with the more powerful 2-liter engines, appealing to younger drivers or those looking for more exciting drives. Opel produced the Rekord D from 1972 to 1977 with a total output of over 1.1 million units in these 5.5 years, being the second Opel Rekord to hit 1 million units. The model was very successful in Europe, particularly in Germany, where Opel had established itself as a reliable brand for affordable, well-made vehicles. The Rekord D nevertheless sold at a slightly slower rate than its predecessor, and sales slowed towards the end of the production run. The Opel Rekord D competed in the crowded segment of European family cars, facing stiff competition from models like the Ford Taunus, for example, known for its own mid-size offerings. Ford Taunus was similarly popular across Europe and offered comparable performance and features. It also had French competition with Peugeot 504, and this Peugeot 504 boasted a reputation for durability and comfortable interiors, appealing to similar family-focused buyers. It also faced German competition by the Audi 100, and the Audi's mid-size sedan was also a competitor, often positioned as a slightly more premium option than the Rekord D. And you also had the Volkswagen Passat. Although released in 1973, the Passat was a fresh and competitive entry in the mid-size market with modern styling and front-row drive appeal. Predecessor and successor-wise, the Rekord D wasn't that interesting, as the Rekord D replaced the Opel Rekord C in 1972. The Rekord C had been in production since 1966 and introduced a sleek, curvier design language, while the Rekord C and curvier design language. While the Rekord C was popular, Opel aimed to improve its practicality and robustness with the Rekord D, and also, in my opinion, increased its boxiness. The successor of the Rekord D was the Opel Rekord E, followed the Rekord D up in 1977. It introduced more modern styling with softer lines, improved aerodynamics, and updates to engines and interior features. The Rekord E continued Opel's tradition of offering a reliable and practical family car. This generation Rekord was actually extremely long and was made for 9 years between 1977 and 1986, being, besides the Opel Rekord or the Opel Olympia Rekord, the longest generation of Opel Rekord to ever exist. The last video about the last generation of the Rekord series, and in this video we are going to be talking about the last car to name itself the Rekord, and actually as the first Rekord ever had a major facelift in its generation, in my opinion making the second phase unrecognizable in comparison to the first phase. Also known as the Vauxhall Carlton in Great Britain, the Opel Rekord E was a popular mid-size car produced by Opel between 1977 and 1986. During which it had two main versions, the E1 being produced between 1977 and 1982 and the E2 being produced between 1982 and 1986. Known for its reliability and spacious design, the Rekord E came in various body styles: a 2-door limousine, a 4-door limousine, a 3- and 5-door station wagon marketed as the Caravan, and a 3-door panel van. This series held a significant position in Opel's lineup, preceding the Opel Omega as the flagship large sedan. The Rekord E was known for its sleek yet practical design, prioritizing aerodynamics with an impressive drag coefficient of 0.418. The model featured larger dimensions than its predecessor, offering more cabin space and comfort. The E1 models retained a more conventional design, while the E2 facelift introduced a flatter front grille, improved headlights, and other cosmetic updates for a more modern look, really making the car look like a 1980s car. Phase 1 was 4.6 meters long, and the phase 2 eventually was 4.65 meters long. And engine-wise, the two phases of the Rekord were kind of divided. The first phase basically had the same exact engines as the Rekord D, except for the 2.0 E, which basically was a 2-liter injection engine with 110 horsepower. But also diesel-wise there was an improvement, as the 2.1D with 60 horsepower in the Rekord D was replaced by a 2.3D with 65 horsepower in 1978. The engines in the first phase between 1977 and 1982 were as following. The smallest engine, just like in the Rekord D, remained to be the 1.7N, and it was produced between 1977 and 1980, as it had a power output of 60 horsepower and 112 Nm, pushing the car up to around 145 km an hour. Fuel consumption wise, it was actually quite fuel inefficient, as it had an estimated fuel efficiency of 10 liters per 100 km, and it wasn't fast as well, as it had a 0 to 100 time of around 21 seconds. The 1.7N engine was the only engine that could be paired with a 4-speed manual, as there were no other gearboxes available for it, as the others had a 3-speed automatic transmission optional as well. It also remained to be the one and only engine that was taken out of production before the end of phase 1, as this engine was taken out of production in 1980, as well as the 2.1D in 1978, so it makes 2 engines in total, when phase 2 actually was introduced in 1982. The 1.7N was followed up by another normal petrol engine, as this was the 1.9N. This was available between 1977 and 1982 with a bit more horsepower and torque at 75 horsepower and 132 Nm, and had a little higher top speed at 155 km an hour. Fuel consumption wise, it was even more or less fuel efficient at an average fuel consumption of 10.5 liters per 100 km, yet it was a lot faster, rated at a 0 to 100 time of 16.5 seconds. And this engine basically was a bigger 1.7N with a fuel consumption that was a little bit higher, but also with much better specifications, making cruising on the highways much easier. And then the biggest normal petrol powered engine was the 2-liter N, which basically also was in production between 1977 and 1982 and had a power output of 90 horsepower and 142 Nm. It gave the car a normal and, in my opinion, quite good top speed of 165 km an hour. Was a little bit less fuel efficient than 1.9N, rated at 11 liters per 100 km, and it had a 0 to 100 time of only 14.5 seconds, which was quite modest. This engine was the only engine to have a super petrol variant, and this was called the 2-liter S. The 2-liter S was also in production between 1977 and 1982 and had much more power at 101 horsepower and 155 Nm, making a top speed of 171 km an hour possible, and having a fuel consumption a bit less, rated at 9.5 liters per 100 km, actually being more fuel efficient. 0 to 100 time wise, it was also faster than the 2-liter normal petrol, as it was 13 seconds. And you also, as said before, had a fuel injected variant of the 2-liter called the 2.0E, and this was also in production during its whole period between 1977 and 1982, and was more powerful than the 2-liter S with 110 horsepower and 159 Nm, giving the car a very good top speed of 180 km an hour with a fuel consumption of around 9.5 liters per 100 km. And also the 0 to 100 time was actually better, rated at 12.5 seconds. This engine was a bit more powerful than the already more powerful 2.0S, and it was a bit more fuel efficient, a bit faster, and was Opel's first fuel injection engines to be fitted in a model made by Opel. It was actually the start of the fuel injection. Besides petrol engines, you also had various diesel engines, and this generation didn't have engines smaller for specific markets, like the Rekord D 2.0 diesel was, for instance, in the Italian market. The diesel engines were as following. You had the 2.1 liter diesel, which was available between 1977 and 1978 and basically was taken straight out of the Rekord D. It had a power output of 60 horsepower and 113 Nm, had a top speed of 138 km an hour, and had an average fuel consumption of 7.8 liters per 100 km. It was actually quite slow, as the 0 to 100 time was 24 seconds, and this engine was in production for 1 year in the Rekord E, as it was succeeded by the 2.3D in 1978. The 2.3D was produced between 1978 and 1982 as it was the successor, and it was more powerful as the power output was 65 horsepower and 127 Nm, giving the car a slightly higher top speed rated at 140 km an hour, being a bit less fuel efficient rated at 8.5 liters per 100 km, and also being a bit faster rated at 22.5 seconds 0 to 100 time. The automatic transmissions actually slowed each engine down by around 1.5 seconds mostly for the petrol engines and up to 4 seconds for the diesel engines. The second phase Rekord E2 was in my opinion revolutionary as it implemented more fuel injected engines and even a turbocharged 2.3 liter diesel. These engines that came with this phase made the car seem more modern in my opinion, mostly because the first phase had engines taken out of the older Rekord D. Between 1982 and 1986 the models had engines in the following order. The 1.8N was the smallest engine and it had replaced the 1.7N, and this was a normal petrol engine, producing 75 horsepower and 135 Nm. It had a top speed of 160 km an hour while still maintaining an average fuel consumption of 9.5 liters per 100 km. It was in production the whole phase between 1982 and 1986, and it was quite decent powered as it had a 0 to 100 time of only 17 seconds. This engine basically was the same as the 1.7N, as this was only available with the 4-speed manual and not with a 3-speed automatic. It kind of had taken over the place of the 1.7N in this case. There actually was a 1.8 super petrol engine available called the 1.8S, and this had 90 horsepower and 145 Nm. It was way more powerful as it had a top speed of 173 km an hour while still having a decent fuel consumption of 9 liters per 100 km. It also could be optioned with a 5-speed transmission, as this gave the car actually a lower fuel consumption at 8.5 liters per 100 km. This engine also was available during the whole second phase between 1982 and 1986, and the 0 to 100 time was 14.5 seconds and around 14.3 seconds for the 5-speed. You also had a fuel injection for the 1.8 called the 1.8i. This had 100 horsepower and 140 Nm while still having a top speed of 173 km an hour. It had an average fuel consumption not much better than the 1.8S rated at 9 liters per 100 km and 8.6 liters per 100 km for the 5-speed, as this engine also was capable of being fitted with the 5-speed, and this was actually introduced in its second to last year of the production of the Rekord E in 1985, and it was also available for 1985 up until 1986. It was actually a bit faster than the 1.8S as the 0 to 100 time was 13.5 seconds and was actually 13.3 seconds for the 5-speed. And it was followed up by another super petrol engine, because the 2-liter normal petrol was taken out of production. The 2-liter S had 100 horsepower, 152 Nm, and actually gave the car a top speed a bit higher than the normal predecessor at 181 km an hour. It had an average fuel consumption actually quite the same, remaining at 9 liters per 100 km, and this was also available with the 5-speed rated at 8.8 liters, a bit more fuel efficient. It was also available between 1982 and 1986, although the 5-speed was available between 1984 and 1986, and it had a quite quick acceleration of 12.5 seconds from a 0 to 100 time, although the 5-speed was actually a bit faster, rated at 12.3 seconds. You also had the same 2.0e, which was the injected engines, and this had 110 horsepower and 162 Nm, being still a bit more powerful than the 2-liter S. This also gave the car a higher top speed of 187 km an hour, while being more fuel efficient, rated at 8.5 liters per 100 km. And this was actually available up until 1984, between 1982 and 1984, and it had the same 0 to 100 time 12 seconds. And this engine was always paired with the 5-speed manual or the optional 3-speed automatic. It was actually succeeded in 1984 by the 2.2e, a 2.2 liter fuel injected engine. and this had 115 horsepower and much more torque, rated at 182 Nm. This gave the car a very good top speed of 190 km an hour, while still having an average fuel consumption of 8.5 liters per 100 km. It was produced in the second phase as the successor of the 2-liter E and was produced between 1984 and 1986, and gave the car a very good 0 to 100 acceleration of 10.5 seconds for the 4-speed manual or 10.3 seconds for the 5-speed. Besides the petrol engines, you had the same 2.3D, although the 2.3D actually was improved in 1983, as between 1982 and 1983 it actually was the same 2.3 liter diesel with 65 horsepower, 127 Nm of torque, and actually a higher top speed, rated at 155 km an hour. This engine could be fitted with the 5-speed manual as well, as the fuel consumption was 7 liters per 100 km for the 4-speed manual and 6.8 liters for the 5-speed. It actually was produced between 1982 and 1983, basically also between 1978 and 1982, and it had a 0 to 100 time of 23 seconds or 22.6 for the 5-speed. It was succeeded by a more powerful 2.3 liter diesel with 70 horsepower and 135 Nm, a slight increase. This also gave the car a higher top speed of 160 km an hour, a fuel consumption actually quite the same at 7 liters per 100 km for the 4-speed manual and a lower 6.7 liters per 100 km for the 5-speed, and this was available for the rest of the phase 2 between 1983 and 1986. It was also quite fast, a bit faster than the 2.3D, with a 0 to 100 time of 20.5 seconds for the 4-speed manual and 20 seconds for the 5-speed. Eventually Opel decided to turbocharge its diesel engines, and the 2.3D was a turbocharged, called the 2.3 Turbo Diesel. It had 86 horsepower and an astonishing 189 Nm, giving the car a slightly higher top speed than the 2.3D with 70 horsepower, rated at 168 km an hour, while being more fuel efficient, rated at 6.5 liters per 100 km. This engine was available between 1982 and 1986, basically a year after the introduction of the more powerful 2.3 liter diesel, and the 0 to 100 acceleration also was much faster than before, rated at 15.5 seconds from 0 to 100. This engine, just like the 2 liter E, also was only paired with either a 5-speed manual or the optional 3-speed automatic transmission. It was much faster than the normal 2.3D, while even being more powerful and more fuel efficient. It was a good start for Opel with the diesels and would later become a bigger interest of Opel. The diesel engine also was quite distinctive, as it had a difference in the hood rather than the other models. This was because the engine was taller than the other engines and therefore needed a small bump in the hood to give it enough space to be able to lay underneath the car. Most Rekord E engines were paired with either a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic transmission, with later models offering a 5-speed manual and overdrive in selected trims, really showing innovations Opel made engine and transmission wise during the 1980s. Opel released various special editions of the Rekord E, such as the sporty SRE and luxury-oriented Phase 1 Berlina, and later for the Phase 2 the sporty Sport Edition and luxurious CD, GLS and Berlina editions. These models often featured a unique upholstery, alloy wheels and distinctive badging. The SRE, for instance, included two-tone paint and was available as a sedan or a caravan, catering to customers seeking a more dynamic look and feel. For the second phase, the rarest trim of the Opel Rekord E was likely the GLS trim, which offered higher specification and more luxury features than the standard trims. These versions often included additional equipment like upgraded interiors, more advanced electronics and distinctive styling, making them less common compared to the basic trims. This was also for the CD trim as well. Throughout its production, Opel manufactured nearly 1 million units of the Rekord E, making it a common sight across Europe in the 1980s. The car's build quality and reputation for reliability made it popular with families, business owners and fleet managers alike, and the Rekord E1 alone was produced for 962,280 times, with the E2 model also enjoying robust sales, although it is unclear what those exact numbers were. The Rekord E competed with the Ford Granada, offering similar size and performance in the large family car segment, the Volkswagen Passat, which was known for its practicality and dependability, and the Peugeot 505, which blended comfort with European styling. In 1986, Opel introduced the Omega as the Rekord E successor, featuring modern technology, improved design and better performance, reflecting shifting market trends, prioritizing higher comfort and advanced capabilities. A special version of the Rekord E was the Chevrolet Rekord, sold in Africa. The Chevrolet Rekord E was available between 1978 and 1983. It was a South African version of GM's Rekord, offered as a 4-door sedan and a 5-door wagon. It was powered by various engines, a 2-liter inline-4 producing 100 horsepower, which was Opel based between 1980 and 1982, a 2.3-liter inline-4 engine with 92 horsepower based on the Chevrolet 236 between 1977 and 1982, and a more unknown 2.8-liter inline-6 with 106 horsepower, introduced in 1982. The Chevrolet Rekord E was rebadged as an Opel in 1984, marking the end of its Chevrolet branding in the region. Thanks for watching this last video in this series. These videos started to push my channel to the public, and I'm very thankful for the people who have been here on my channel because of these videos. I will be continuing with different Opel models from now on, and if you haven't subscribed already, please don't forget to subscribe and also check out this playlist with many interesting videos about the automotive industry. And also check out my other Opel Cadet videos already, and I will see you in the next video.